I didn't want you to think I was depriving myself of lunch. So between workshops, we ate lunch, and I spilled my chicken parmesan, and that cheese gets so stretchy.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I lost a little bit. After I lose a little bit of this, it won't quite fall so well straight down, but we'll have to work on it. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Do you think this is it?
I know
start?
from my crew this is it.
Okay. Should I start, or should we give them a little bit more time?
I think there's only 2 that I know that they may be tied up with work, so yeah, I would start.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is there any preliminaries, or should I just jump in?
Jumping in, sure.
All right.
Jump into the pool.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm Rob Jenkins. Let me just tell you a little bit about my experience and what I do in these workshops. One of the things that I have a zillion workshops, but this one, I kind of looked at what everybody wanted and kind of put some slides together, but it doesn't. We don't necessarily need to follow this. It's very. I like to be a little informal in that we get to know each other and know what your needs are, so that I can move around and I can change the direction of my workshop anytime. So don't worry about that. It's informal in the way that you can interrupt me, you can disagree with me, you can tell me your problems and life situations. Anything you want is okay. I don't have a script that is really strict. I have some objectives that I'm thinking about, and I'll offer those to you in a little bit here. But I like to do these type of things for a lot of reasons. I am a professor of English as a second language at Santa Ana College, non-credit School of Continuing Education, which means our programs are very much like yours. We have immigrants from all over the world, but mostly Hispanic. We have about 80% Hispanic and 10% Vietnamese, and then 10% of everything else. Our students have an average experience in school in their own country of about 6 years, but we have everything from 0 to graduates. So we have all sorts of different people, but mostly, I mean, if you were to take an average, it's about 6-year education in their country. We have ages from anywhere from 18 to my oldest student was 85.
Anyone here? Yeah.
And so we have all sorts of different students. Our classes are big. I understand from the email that your classes are basically small, like
3 to 6, 3 to 7.
yeah.
Right.
So,
Ours are big here.
Oh, are they?
Ours are
Okay.
big, yeah.
I average about 32 students in my class.
We do 25.
Yeah, okay. So, so we have a kind of a mix there. We'll talk about that a little bit. We have a very big school. I was going to say relatively big. It's not fair to say. 25,000 students. About 20,000 are ESL students in our non-credit program. And we have 300 teachers and 6 full-time teachers. I'm one of the full-time. It's very difficult for us to manage what's going on there because of the number of part-timers, because we don't get to have intimate discussions as often as I would like. I'm the professional development chair for the district for non-credit and coordinator, I guess you say. And so we keep the teachers going. We have about 200 workshops a year, plus a lot of other more specific things besides workshops, like peer coaching and all sorts of different things that we do in the classroom for our teachers, and we try to work it in. But with 300 teachers, it's kind of a challenge to get to everybody. So I do have some experience in, I've been teaching ESL for a long time, and I've had a lot of different various experiences, but I don't know everything, and I don't want to stand up and sound like I'm some know-it-all guy. And, I was part of the team that wrote Stand Out, and the team of 2, there's 2 of us, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as we go along. My goal, first of all, what's your name?
Dennis.
Dennis, okay. So Farhad, Dennis, and Mark, and Flor, and Joseph, and Sandy, and Emmy, and Bob, and Rosemary, and Jeremy, and Jerry, right? Okay. So we do all, my objective here today, my bottom line, what I want to do, but of course, like I said, I can shift gears. My bottom line is, since you're using Stand Out, is to help you to see all the potential that's there and help you to recognize what you might have forgotten or don't consider important, maybe is more important than you had thought about before, and to kind of help remind us of what can be done. I need this too. It's not just you guys that need it. I use Stand Out. I've been using Stand Out for many years now, since it was out, 2002, the first edition. And this is the second edition. So I've been using it for about 10 years. And every once in a while I have to remind myself of things like lesson planning. Believe it or not, this is our claim to fame is lesson planning. And yet there are times when I'll skip different steps in the lesson because I think, oh, I need to do this or that or the other. And when I revamp and I think about it and I talk about some of the things we'll talk about today, you'll understand what I'm talking about in terms of there are some very important things. Now, the lesson plan that's in the lesson planner, maybe that's not what we need to be using. I mean, maybe it's just a framework for you. I understand that teachers have all different ways of approaches, and I think it's important that you understand that you are the experts for your students, not me. I'm not the one that sits with them every day and works with them and talks to them. You know what their needs are. And a lot of what Stand Out is student-centered or learner-centered instruction. And if you think about it that way, and what do we try to help learners to know and to do, and we get to know them better, we realize that they have needs, and every class is different. Not only are each of your classes different, but also a class from one semester to the next, one term to the next, is going to be different because your students have different needs. And so it's our job as teachers to find out what those needs are and try to figure out how we can best help our students. And I know that we probably do that, but I'm going to give you some suggestions on some ideas that you might do. I am happy to answer questions, and I'm happy to deviate from where we're going. First thing you saw that I did was I learned your names. I think that names above everything else is probably the most important thing we can do. When I start my class at the beginning of a semester, I spend as much time as it takes to learn all the students' names and to learn, not only learn all the students' names, but for the students to learn each other's names. I think it's just so important because that connection makes so much difference in terms of what our students are about, because we make a connection and we build some trust. And it's really important. That's the first step. I remember when I first started teaching years ago, and I went into a classroom thinking, okay, I know what I'm doing, and I can handle this. And now I know this never happens to you, but some of my students don't come on time. But I know that never happens to you, right? And I remember teaching at night and having my class getting involved and saying, hey, I can do this. Look, I got all these students, they're all involved. And then I have a student comes in at 7:30 when my class starts at 6, and he comes in and sits in the back. And I'm just wailing away, doing great. We're all interacting and everything's good, and I'm thinking so much of myself. And then I see this student and I don't know what to do. How do I help him? This was years ago. What do I do? How do I get him involved? And I remember watching many students walk out the door after a couple days that would do that. They just couldn't maintain. They couldn't seem to stay. They'd get there late and they just couldn't seem to be involved. And it was, the first thing I did that made a lot of difference was that I got to know their names and I called them by name. And now I have this rule in my class, and my students don't know this, that I have this rule, but I follow it. It's an internal rule that I follow with myself all the time. I say every student's name every day in every class. And I think it's so important to do. So it's more important to me than the lesson. So, I have teachers that disagree with me. I say this all the time, and I have teachers disagree with me. And I understand, and I'm not trying to dictate anything, but I'm just telling you what I do. I'm on the board, and I'm writing, and we're talking, and we're doing a lesson, and somebody walks in, I'll stop what I'm doing. I'll interrupt this, because to me, that student walking in the door is more important than what I got here. It really is to me. And when that person comes in, oh, Jose, it's good to see you. I missed you yesterday. I'm glad you're here today. Have a seat. Let's get going. And then we go back to the lesson. And I will do that every time somebody walks in. And when I walk into the class and there's 5 or 6 students building up to the 32 students, I will talk to each one and have a little conversation as much as I can. And talk to them because I think it's that important. So do you have any strategies that you use to learn your students' names?
Yes.
What do you do, Joseph?
Have them put put their names on a piece of
Okay.
paper, fold it in half, and it sits in front of them until I get to actually know them.
Good.
Once I get to know the names, they don't need me.
Okay, great.
And also get to know each other's names.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Is there any other strategies you use? Do you do anything to help them remember those names? Yes, Rosemary.
I do more for them to remember each other's names because
Uh-huh.
I think that's important too.
Right, I do too.
And, you know, one of the first days, I have find somebody who drives a great car, find somebody who.
Okay, good.
And they have to go, and then they have to write the name, if they don't have to spell it, they ask for the spelling.
Good. Okay. Every activity, especially at the beginning, you want to make sure your students know each other's names. So at the very beginning, they're asking each other, and you're saying, so part of this activity is you have to know the people you're talking to. So if I'm asking you to stand up, Mark, and go around the class and talk to 5 different students, you need to know their names and remember them. If they're working in groups, you need to know everybody's name before you actually start the activity. You can do a lineup activity where you have the students line up in order alphabetical by first name. You can have activities where you're taking a ball, and I just use a wadded up piece of paper. I'm a little lazy when it comes to reality. We pass around the paper and throw it to somebody, and then they have to say, yes, my name is Rosemary, and I'm from wherever. And then you pass them and say, what's your name? And Jerry said, Jeremy, that's his name, etc. And we work on that. And just an opportunity. Then we have kind of competition in the class where I will show them, and I've just gotten really good at this. So I start learning everybody's names right away. And it's not like I have a good memory. I certainly don't have a good memory. I don't remember a lot of things. Ask my wife, I'll tell you right now. But as I go around and I say everybody's names, and now who else can do this? And the students will have a competition. If I can do that in a class period, I'll do it in a class period. If it takes 2 or 3, I'll do it 2 or 3. Because that's how important it is. And then just keep reinforcing it. To me, that's important. What do you think is the number one indicator of student success? What characteristic do students have that you would say is the number one indicator of student success? Yes, Ruby.
Committed.
Being committed, okay? This persistence of keep coming because you're committed. Why are they committed? Why are some students more committed than others?
That's what I'm asking.
Okay. What do you think? Is there a reason? We'll talk about this as we go. But what do you think? Why are students sometimes more committed than other students?
Well, it's kind of positive reinforcement. If they see progress in the world, they feel good about it, even though it's minor progress.
Right.
So whenever they make progress, I think it's our job to reinforce that they made that progress.
Okay.
And a specific example, you really did this better than yesterday.
Right.
That gets them more involved
Okay.
and more confident. Because it's tough. I had to learn different languages when I was a kid, and it's very difficult.
Okay, let me ask you this. Has this ever happened to any of you? How are you? What's your name?
Ben Angle.
Ben.
I'm sorry I'm late.
That's okay, no problem. Okay, so let me ask you this question. At the end of a semester, when it's time for a student to move on, you say, okay, you're ready to move on. You passed, you did well on the test, and you're ready to move on. And the student says, oh no, teacher, I love you. I can't go any further. I want to stay with you forever. Has that ever happened? What? It happens to me too, so I'm not putting myself above everyone else, but what can we do about it? One thing we can do is help our students to know that they're learning, and sometimes we don't. And so everybody's learning, and so they see their partner and they say, well, obviously I'm not speaking any better than I did at the beginning of the semester because I'm speaking the same as you. And they don't realize that they're improving, right? So we need to develop ideas, and I'll show you some of those today, about how we can get students to really recognize that they're learning. It's so important. So hopefully we'll have fewer people saying, well, we hope all our students are saying, we love you, but they're anxious to move on. For example, my class is called the Beginning to ESL. And I tell my students at the beginning of the semester, I say, this is no longer Beginning to ESL. And they look at me and say, what? We're in the wrong place? What's happened? And I tell them, this is now preparation for Beginning 3. And everything we do is in preparation for Beginning 3. So I talk to them about what's coming and what to expect in the next level. I know the next level very well. So I'm not just isolated in this level. It's a curriculum. It's an idea that they're moving from one step to another. If I don't know that next level, how can I possibly know if they're ready for it? So it's really good if you get an opportunity, if you haven't yet, and you don't really know the level above you, it's really good to get to know the level above you, so that you can help those students to know what is expected. This is what happens in this level. This is how it works. So that's one thing that we can do. And then it makes it a lot easier to say, you know, are you improving? Are you getting closer to this? Because we have objectives and we have ideas. In competency-based education, back when it started, you know, before it started, the audiolingual was going strong in the 60s and 70s, and we had side-by-side and practical English. I don't know if any of you remember practical English, but those two were the big staples, and then side-by-side just took off and practical English kind of stayed where it was. But they just kept, you know, it was this audiolingual thing. And then the competency-based books came out with the natural approach. The idea is all we need to do in the class is to talk, and the more we talk, the students will learn. And that part is really true. There's nothing wrong with the natural approach or the communicative approach. But the students need to know that they're improving. And what happened with some of those older books is that the teachers would teach out of them, and the students wouldn't know if they're really improving. In fact, the authors of the books would say that if you do Unit 8 or you do Unit 1, because it's open entry, open exit, you can come in any time, and it's not harder than the other part. And that, unfortunately, made it so the students didn't really know if they were learning or not. They weren't really confident, and the teacher wasn't either. So what we have now, starting with Stand Out, and then other books have come out with objectives for everything we do. You can point to that objective and say, see, this is what we want to learn today in preparation for the next level. And this is how we're going to get there. And at the end of that day, you can say, how are you doing? Okay, now there's some caveats there, because students have there's this cycle that happens. And I tell my students, this is very normal, but you learn and you forget, you learn and you forget, you learn and forget. I always use this example when I say that, and that is that, and this is a grammar example, so it's not quite exactly what we might do in our classes often as ever, but some of you teach a beginning low class, and I know that you teach them the third person singular S. Is that right? You teach them that in the simple present, third person singular S. Okay. So now, who teaches intermediate? Okay. So you're teaching an intermediate or advanced level, and do your students, Bob, ever forget the third person singular S?
Always.
Oh my gosh. So what did the low teachers? The low teachers didn't do their job, right? Is that the truth? No.
They just forget.
Yeah, they forget. And it's something that has to be reinforced until there comes a point where they actually acquire whatever it is. And it's the same with everything we do. Our students don't know that. So they think, oh, I'm just not very smart. I just can't do this. Because they think, oh, I forgot already. He taught me yesterday and I already don't know. So I can't do it. So what does that do to their, oh, I almost said the word. Because I've asked you a question and I haven't got back to it. But the idea is that our students need to know that they're progressing. Okay. So I just went off on a tangent about persistence. Let's go back now. What is the most important? Rosemary had an idea that persistence, continuing on strongly, is one of the most important characteristics students can have. I agree with you. I have another one in mind. So what do you think? Do you think there's anything else, a characteristic that a student has that helps them to continue on, that helps them to have success? In other words, what's the number one indicator of student success?
Sometimes they ask for additional work to do at home.
Okay.
That to me
Okay,
is
so
kind of
students
ultimate,
students that are willing to do the work,
Yes.
even independently.
Aside from what I kind of
Right,
now say,
right.
do you have something else I can do?
Okay, good. That's a good indicator. Yes,
A
Rosemary.
goal.
A goal, having something in mind that they want to reach. Good, okay? Jeremy?
No.
Okay.
Scratch my nose.
All right, so what else? Any other ideas? Okay, this is mine. The number one indicator for student success to me is a student that comes into class confident that they can. And if we can instill in them confidence, they'll be so much more successful. I agree with you guys. All of your ideas are fine. But to me, the number one thing, if I can figure a way to help my students be confident, that timid student may be the smartest student in my class, or they have the highest intelligence. But yet, if that student doesn't participate, isn't willing to take risks, is afraid to make mistakes, and doesn't speak out, that student's not going to learn as fast as this student is. So to me, confidence, if we can figure a way to help our students have more confidence, we will improve, then they will progress more rapidly. So that's how I feel. Hillary, we have some food out here.
Oh,
Okay. So I'm assuming it's for us. You think?
But of course, you really are up against some serious cultural behavior too.
Yes. Oh,
not,
yes.
Not necessarily, they're not confident. They're just not used to
Right.
speak up in
No,
class.
that's
or,
absolutely
I mean,
right.
that's-
And we want to encourage new behavior
Yeah.
that maybe they're not good at.
Yeah.
That is a different
Yeah,
thing.
that's
You're
a-
right.
yeah,
Some
yeah.
students don't feel like it's a place to have group work or to work together. They don't know if it's a place to speak up when the teacher's speaking or to ask a question.
Right.
Because maybe it shows that the teacher's not good because I'm asking this question because I don't know this. So therefore, I don't want the teacher to think that I don't think that he's doing a good job.
Right.
So yeah, there's cultural things that also get involved. All right, my thought is that if we can help the students have the confidence and understand the culture in such a way that we can really make some of these activities that we have really function and work, we're doing well. But you're right, we need to be sensitive. In the last workshop I did, I confessed a few insensitive times that I had growing up in teaching ESL. This way. Okay, we're going to skip that. And excuse me for skipping slides. I have one workshop. I have one set of slides for everybody for all the 5 places I'm visiting. So your emphasis is different than another school's emphasis than what you've asked for. But so I might be skipping a little bit. But we're going to take the Stand Out quiz. Now the Stand Out quiz I give you for a couple reasons. One, it gives me an opportunity to talk about some things that I may not have, that you may have forgotten about or hadn't thought about, and it's also for me to see what you know and what you're doing with Stand Out. And I want to make sure that you know all the resources and how to use them. I'm not trying to sell you on those resources. I believe again that there are so many. This is one of the issues with Stand Out. There's so many resources that you should pick and choose. You don't necessarily. Somebody asked me, well, do I have to use Grammar Challenge, the Reading Writing Challenge, and the Activity Bank CD-ROM and the video? And no, you use what's best for your students. Again, who's the experts of your students? So my first question is, what classroom management tool is used in Stand Out that identifies when and how to use activities appropriately? Is it A, icons in the student book, B, the lesson planner, or C, an extensive teacher's guide? You can be wrong. Take a risk. Joseph.
I think it's B.
You think it's B, a lesson planner? Does everybody agree, or do you think? Rosemary, what do you think?
I think it might be all of them.
All of them? Well, there's no extensive teacher's guide. So it's not.
I agree with Joseph, the lesson plan.
Yeah? Icons? Well, the icons certainly help. I'm going to give you my answer, and I don't have any problem with you guys thinking anything else except for C can't be, because there isn't one. But I'm going to say the lesson planner, okay? Why? And to answer the question of why is the lesson planner, let's talk about number 2. What is the difference between a lesson planner and a teacher's guide? What is your opinion? Just speak up and whatever you think. What is the difference between a teacher's guide and a lesson planner? Rosemary.
A lesson planner for me is much easier to use.
Okay, why?
It doesn't have as much verbiage in it. It just gets right down to the point.
Well, if it wasn't for my co-author, Stacy, the book would be this thick and it would have a lot of verbiage, but yes, that might work. Okay, what else do you think?
Well, I think it makes suggestions in the teacher, there's room for the teacher to be flexible.
Why?
With the lesson plan. It gives options.
Well, I'm very glad that you said that, because sometimes I just remember when one textbook came out, and I went to a workshop. They said, "Oh, we don't do that lesson planning stuff because it restricts the teacher." Well, I hope it doesn't. I hope you don't feel like you have to do everything that's in the book. The idea is to give you some framework. In fact, I do a lot more than what's in the lesson planner, because I would have, like I said, it would have been this thick if it wasn't for Stacy saying, "Rob, you don't need this. Rob, this is too long. Rob, this is convoluted," and she's cutting out half of my book. So thanks a lot, Stacy. Anyway, but I'm glad she did, because because it was too long. Okay, so that's good. Any other thoughts about it? The difference between activity bank, a lesson planner and extensive teacher's guide?
I think
Sandy?
also gauging the time that is needed for
Good.
each section.
Okay, and those are examples. That's how long it would take me. But one of the things that we found is that when Stacy and I taught lesson planning in the beginning, before we did the books, we found that some people got so jazzed and got so excited, like in a warm-up section, that they did the warm-up for 2 hours of a 3-hour class. And that just doesn't work, right? We don't expect you to follow 10 minutes here and 20 minutes here, but it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea how long you can go, okay? Any other thoughts about the difference between a lesson planner and an activity bank? I'm sorry, a extensive teacher's guide. Okay, let me give you an example. A teacher's guide, first of all, how it was created. You have a book and you want some activities in that book, all right? So what you do is you say, okay, what do we do with this page? There's a reading. Well, we could do this, we could do that. All right, here's some activities that you can do with this picture or with this reading. Here's some activities we can do with this exercise. Here's how you might want to approach this. That's a teacher's guide. And so the book is written first and then the teacher's guide. That's number one, all right? Also what happens in a lesson planner, actually Stacy and I wrote the lesson plans first before we even tackled the book itself. So we wrote, at the time there was 4 books, and we wrote 360 lesson plans. And then we said, for the 4 books, and then we said, okay, now what resources do we need for these lessons? Okay? A couple things that does. One thing it does is it avoids this, what I consider a problem in template-driven or template-designed books. So what happens when you write a book first, often you'll say, okay, here we're going to need to teach this, and so Unit 1, Lesson 1, let's start out with a reading, and then let's have an exercise, comprehension exercise, whatever it is. Then let's go to Unit 2, Lesson 1, and we're going to do a reading and a comprehension exercise. You'll notice that in Stand Out, the activities are totally varied because we did a lesson plan first, and then we decided what activities in the lesson plan. Then we decided what resources. So we didn't follow any template-driven thing. We said, what is best for this particular objective? So we designed objectives. In fact, what we did was we had this big chart on the wall, and we took the biggest schools in the United States. We took other things like CASAS and other programs and standards and EFF and scans and some other things, and we put them all up on the wall. We had this long wall, and we said, okay, what do they all have in common? And we took and made objectives. And then from those objectives, we wrote the lesson plan. The other thing that the lesson planner does is that it gives you ideas from the beginning of class to the end of class. You'll notice that sometimes a lot of times you have the book closed. It's not about the book, it's about your students. It's about learning. It's about the objective. So we don't start with the book, we start with the idea of what are we trying to accomplish. And then we go use the book as a resource. Does that make sense to you? So that's really a big difference between the extensive teacher's guide and a lesson planner. And that is that it's not only about those things on the page. It's about what you do at the beginning of class. You might warm up and not even have the book open. All right? Any questions? Any thoughts about that? Any feelings about that? Are you all using the lesson planner?
Well, I'm having a lot of thoughts. First of all, I think Stand Out is fabulous. I think these lesson plans are invaluable, and honestly, I have just as good a time making up my lesson plan, which I do the weekend before, as I do teaching.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Okay, so, but to me, the issue isn't a lesson plan, it's adapting your lesson plan to the circumstances of our particular classrooms.
Right.
Now, I don't know about everybody here, but mine tend to be rather small, like maybe 4 or 5 people, and sometimes they don't all show up because they've gotten jobs or kid problems or what have you. So one question is, what do you say? Because in a situation like that, a lot of the suggestions that are in the lesson plans about, pair up with a partner and do something, and then everybody goes into a corner, and then everybody reports back to the class.
It's not gonna work.
No,
I
it's
know.
not.
I thought a lot about that as I read Mark's email to me and Flora's email.
And I'd like you to,
Yes.
I don't know whether this is the moment, but I'd like you to discuss how you
Can adapt.
would adapt a lesson plan to that. And the other thing is, at some point, I'd like to know if you have a favorite, like a website that you like, that has conversation starters, because I think the one thing where I would say that I'm constantly looking for is I want to hear the English in their mouths. And so I'm always looking to increase conversation.
Right.
Which doesn't always come right out of the lesson
Right,
plan.
right. And that's great. I mean, I don't have a website right now to give you, but I can certainly think about it and get back to you on that. But I think you're right. And I was a little worried when I first started thinking about it. Yeah, this is, and I thrive much more in a class of 30 than I do in a class of 6. You know, and even these workshops. Yesterday, we had a workshop that had about 6 people in it. And then this morning we had one that had 15, and I was a different person. and I just seem to thrive on interaction and things like that. But when you have a smaller group, it's a challenge, and you have to move away from as much group work. Although you can do projects and things like that with a group, if you're going to have, how many did you say? 5?
Yeah, I mean, on a good
day.
night.
Okay. All right. So yeah, and pair work can work well, but the students need to be able to interact with each other because they can't always be speaking to you. So you're right. You need to get things out of their mouths, and how do we do that, and how do we push it? We'll talk a little bit more about it as we go. But yeah, that's really important, and I hope I can answer a few of those questions. And I know that some of you have the same issues. Okay. Okay. I want you in your handout. Everybody have a handout? In your handout, second page, not the first page. Search your system. Second page. The lesson plan is out of order. I'm going to test you. So don't look in your books. All right. I want you to put numbers 1. I feel like the students here. Don't look in your books, students. Close your books. I say no acordeones. You know what that means? Anybody know? Anybody from Mexico? Acordeones means cheating. They put answers on their arms, or they have the accordion. So I say no accordion music here, and we close the books. They all laugh. That's funny. Anyway, for us it's funny. I have a picture of an accordion with a line through it on my wall. So we have here is a lesson plan out of order. So would you just take a couple minutes, and you can talk to somebody next to you if you like, and just put this in order, 1 through 6. What is the first stage, second stage, third stage? See if you can do that real quickly. And feel free to talk about it. So we're going to 5:30, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking 6:30, and then I thought 6:30 sounds late. So I thought I'd better go to some class. Okay, how'd you do? You ready? All right. So here's the test. So what's the first stage in a lesson plan?
Warm up and review.
Warm up and review. Warm up and review. So as we begin our class, we start out. Well, let me ask you this question: When you start your class, everybody's there, right? No. Well, so we don't want to present new information, do we? Because if we do that, we're going to lose those students that are coming in later. So what do? We start out with a warm-up. Also, a warm-up will link what we did the day before with what we're doing today. It's so important to do that because the students need to know there's a plan. Again, when the students know there's a plan, they have confidence. And when they have confidence, they're more willing to share, and they'll persist and keep coming, and all of that. So that's all very important. So warm-up, it can be what we have in the book. It can be homework, and I want to ask you about homework in a minute. But it can be homework. It can be grammar challenge. I use grammar challenge for homework. That's what I use. So it could be grammar challenge, and you're reviewing grammar challenge. Do you all use grammar challenge or no?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. You being both reading and writing challenge and grammar challenge. Okay, good. So it could be any of those things, but it's really, really important. It's important to get the students engaged right away. I know some teachers, and we discourage this at where I work, but with so many teachers, it sometimes becomes a challenge, and that is some teachers just don't start on time. And so they wait for their students. They come, oh, well, my students aren't here anyway. I'm going to start a half hour late. Don't, I'm in class, so I should be getting paid. No, you should start right on time. First of all, students will come more often on time. More students will come on time. Once they get used to being half hour late, then they're later and later and later. That doesn't help any, right? So start on time, but you need to have them engaged right away. So how are you getting that? It could be the application from the day before, but with a different partner if you did partners or whatever it was. So you want to get them involved. You want to get them excited. Okay, what's next?
Introduction.
Introduction. Right. The introduction is really essential, and it goes back to what we were talking about with competency-based education, how it first started and how it is now. We have objectives. The student knows what it is. We write on the board. We say, today we're going to learn this. If you don't do that, how do the students know they're learning? Because they don't know what they're supposed to learn. But we say, this is what we're going to learn, and you know too, and you can measure it. How can you measure it? How can you tell if they've actually accomplished what they need to do now? So that's really important. So you have that introduction. What's next?
Presentation.
Presentation. Oh, what is there to say about presentation? A couple of things. There's a lot of ways to do presentations. And sometimes we get it, we're really clear about it in the lesson planner, and sometimes we could be more clear. But it's my contention, and there's no statistics on this, but I feel like by my experience in my classroom that 80% of the things that I want to teach my students collectively, they know. It's not that Emmy knows everything, 80% of what I'm going to teach, but if I were to take everybody together, now maybe with only 4 or 5 students, that might be a little bit different. But I want to elicit as much as I can from the students. Because if I can elicit information from the students, that means that they are engaged, they are excited, they're thinking about what we're talking about, right? So the eliciting information is really important, I think. I'll give you an example of this. I could just take a picture and say, I could use open the book to page 25 or whatever it is, 63, and look, here's a sign that says turn right, and there's another sign that turns left, and I can teach them right and left. I could do that, but to me, it's much better, even if it takes a little bit longer, to get the students involved. Here's an example. Okay, I'm going to walk over to the books right there at the table, and I'm going to take some steps. Would you count with me, please, and help me to get there? Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 steps to here. Okay, everybody's all right with that? All right, now I want to go to this, I'm going to go to that chair that's kind of sitting in the middle there. How many steps would you say I should take? What do you think? How many steps?
8.
8? What do you think? Anybody have a different opinion? 5? Okay, anybody else?
6.
6? Who's right? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yay, Eddie! Congratulations, that's great. Okay, now I want to go to the clock. How many steps to the clock?
10 steps.
15? 10?
10.
10? Now, how many was that? That's it? Okay, here we go. You ready? 14. 14? Is this 14?
No.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I didn't know. Okay. 1, 2, 3. I can't go any further. Wait a minute. Let me try this again, okay? So how many steps to the clock?
15.
15. 1, 2, 3.
We gotta turn.
What?
We have to turn.
Turn?
Yeah, you're gonna have to turn.
What's turn?
Otherwise, you're just gonna.
Which way?
Left.
Left. Okay, I'm going to turn left. Let me write that on the board. And I didn't give you turn left. You gave it to me. All right? And so I'll write turn left. And then my students can see it. We'll repeat it. We'll work on that. We'll do a little bit more, walk around the room. But I'm pulling it from you instead of giving it to you. That makes so much difference. Eliciting information from our students becomes an important part. The more we get from our students, the more engaged they'll be, and the more it will become applicable in their lives. Okay? So that's one thing that I can do. When I do this activity, I do a lot more in the presentation. I usually wear a tie on that particular day. That's also good because it hides the food stains that are on my shirt. But I will take this tie and I'll ask the student to hide a chair someplace in the classroom. So I take the tie and I put it around my face, and I do. When I first started doing this, I always looked down because I was nervous. But now I trust my students. And so a student will volunteer, so Bob volunteers, he's going to give me directions, but I'm blindfolded. And he's going to give me directions to that chair, and I have to get there. And sometimes I'll put it outside the door, and so all sorts of things that they do with it. But in the process, we are still presenting because the information is still coming in. Okay, so don't think that all I have to do is say, this is right turn, and we're done. Okay, they need to say it. They need to work on it. Maybe I'll have them stand up and do as Simon says, so that we can make sure they do it. But eventually, they need to say it. So eventually, I will have the students giving me directions, and eventually the practice will be that they're giving each other directions.
What level are you talking about right now?
I have a beginning, well, it's between beginning low and beginning high because we have an extra level. So it's called beginning 2. So I have a beginning low, beginning high, beginning 1, beginning 2, and beginning 3 is our program I teach at beginning 2, which is book 1 in Stand Out. Okay, so that's where I am. So I will, we have basic in our school. We used to use book 2 in my level, but now we've cut it back so that we can use basic in level 1. Because of that extra level, it kind of made it more difficult, made it easier to be able to expand on book 2 for beginning 3.
Can I ask you a quick question
Sure.
about levels, because you're mentioning levels?
Yeah.
Is it your experience that there's a huge gap between level 3 and level 4?
In the books?
No, in the people's attainments.
That's a really good question. There used to be in the first edition of the books.
Because I'm level 3 and Farhad over here is level 4.
Yeah.
We've discussed this, and in our school, there's a very large gap. When a level 4 student comes into my class, it's almost like they take over the whole class because they're so far ahead of.
Yeah. Maybe it's just that you're a great teacher. I don't know. Well, that has a lot to do with curriculum and everything else and what's expected and what's being taught. So I really can't tell you, but I know that there is that place in every student, and I would be surprised if it's always in the same place, but it sounds like maybe it is, where the students they finally catch on. There's so many things that they have to learn at the low levels. Not only the grammar and the life skills and everything else, but the logical progression and how we learn in the United States. Reading a chart, reading a graph. Students in beginning 1 and 2, are beginning low and high, they have to really learn how to do that. We make this assumption sometimes as teachers that our students know how to read this grammar chart or know how to read this bar chart, and they don't. And a lot of times, it's when they finally catch on, there is a place where they just shoot up higher quickly, and maybe that's the case. I don't know for your program specifically.
But I think what Ben said maybe 6 minutes ago, where his intent was to put English in their mouth. I think that's what the difference is. By the time students come to 4th level, the English is in their brain and they talk. They may not know the rules, the grammar, syntax, pronunciation, but the ease of talking in English as opposed to the ease talking in their native language, it's a huge difference. Certainly. Once that happens, becomes a catalyst for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's when they really blossom.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
I think that students. One of the things that I tell my students is, all of you, even at the lowest level, are thinking in English a little bit. But by the time they get there, they're thinking in English more than they're not. Mm-hmm. But if I say, for example, what is this? My students will automatically say drive. And I said, did you translate that or did you just say drive? No, I just said drive. But to actually have discourse and be able to discuss things in English and think through a problem, yes, that, you thinking in English is important. Yes.
I teach high beginning and intermediate, and in the intermediate class I always ask at the beginning, who has had a dream in English? And usually there are 1 or 2 people who have, and the rest of them look at me like I'm crazy. And ironically, last year, after having Spanish around me and studying it, I had my first dream in Spanish.
Oh, very good.
I couldn't wait to come in and tell them. I'm so excited.
Very good.
I can't tell what.
That's great.
I
That's
can't
great.
Can you?
Okay, what's the next step after presentation?
Practice.
What's the next step after presentation?
Practice.
Practice. Okay. Seeing glare. What time is it? Oh, we started at 3:30 now. I thought we only had an hour. Okay. All right. So, practice. What can I say about practice? I think one of the things I need to get reminded of all the time about practice, and that is that when we practice, when anybody practices, it's not supposed to be perfect. If you could already do it perfectly, it's not practice. You already can do it, right? And sometimes our students think that, oh, I can't do this, I'm making these mistakes, oh, that's why it's practice, right? And sometimes I don't know if you do, but sometimes I as a teacher think, oh, I failed, they don't know what they're doing, But eventually, we help them to understand that, and we model it and we work on it. But we have to expect errors in practice. That's part of learning, as maybe it's almost a cliche to say now, but errors are part of learning. Joseph?
One of the things I think that makes them confident is to tell them it's okay to make an error.
That's right.
Because from that error you will learn, and you won't make that error again.
That's right. Right. And that's exactly the point. Our students need to hear things like that. They need to understand how this process of learning a language works. Sometimes they think, oh, I got to understand everything the guy says. I got to understand every vocabulary word. I've got to have everything here. I've got to have 100% on the spelling test. I have to have all of these things. But that's not how we learn a language. And I always tell them, learning a language is a skill. It's not some knowledge that we build up. It's a skill. And it takes practice. And at a point, that skill will convert into thinking in that language, and eventually you'll be able to communicate in that language without thinking about all the grammar rules and all the vocabulary. It just starts coming out. And that's really, really important. Okay, so practice is important. One thing about presentation, have you ever had a practice where you say, okay, go, and then they look at each other and say, what am I supposed to do?
Sure.
So that's a really important part of presentation. You get them ready by modeling and taking as much time as it takes. Remember, and I'm going to refer in a second to our mission statement, but students that have success in the classroom after being challenged will have more confidence. Because they know they can do it. And so we need to challenge them. We need to move them forward and help. And we can't, there's a tendency, we as ESL teachers, we love our students. They're great, right? So there's this tendency that, come along, I'm going to help you through your whole life, and I'll be here forever for you. Do you feel that way? Sometimes Sandy's laughing, so I guess. And then, okay, but there's this thing about walking our students through life and never letting go. And we can't do that. They have to become independent, lifelong learners, or we really are doing them a disservice. It doesn't mean we can't love them, and it doesn't mean we can't give them cookies every day. Go ahead, and I would love to be in your class. And I'd be in trouble if I was. But the idea is that we can let go sometimes. We can let them move forward on their own, and that's important. Okay, what's the next step?
Application.
Evaluation.
Who says evaluation? Who says application? Okay, open up your lesson planner and see which one is first. That way you'll remember.
That's in here.
Errors are okay. Remember.
Evaluation.
Evaluation.
Yep.
And then application. Let me explain to you. A lot of people don't get this, and it's understandable. It's not like you made some terrible mistake. Evaluation is not necessarily a test. And the question that comes up on the quiz that we're going to just talk about now is, what is the difference between practice and application? So that'll get us to why we have evaluation where it is. What's the difference between practice and application? Is it the same?
No.
Not? Well, how are they different?
Well, you put what you've learned to work. If you're talking about applications and you're giving practice on filling in whatever, then the application would be to fill out an application.
Okay, very good. So if it was work and they have an application, they fill out an application, okay? If it's having a conversation, you might do some drilling kind of application, conversation or dialogue, and eventually it becomes a role play in an application where they're presenting their own lives, okay? The difference in the teacher's role is important. In practice, this is guided. The teacher's there, you're holding their hands, but in application, you're letting them go, you step back. There's danger in that. There is danger in stepping back. What if the students aren't ready for that application and they fall and they stumble and they get frustrated and they don't come back anymore and they say, I can't do this, and they don't ever want to, take English again. I know I'm being dramatic, but you got the idea, right? Sometimes this is the case. So we need to check to see if they're ready for the application. I always tell this story, it's probably getting old here.
This is my biggest question of all in ESL teaching. We have such multi-level classes. I don't care if you have 4 students
Right.
or 32 students. How long do you practice? I mean, you cannot practice until everybody in the class gets it. You just can't.
Yeah.
Or you're going to lose the ones that have had it days before. I just
Okay. Does anybody have any comment about that before I answer?
Differentiated instruction.
Right, differentiated instruction, but still, what Rosemary's saying is, even with differentiated instruction or multi-level instruction, you have students that don't quite get it. And should you move on, or you keep going until every one of those students gets it? You should not move on? Or you should?
Well, you can move on in a different way.
Okay.
You can move on with the students that have learned, but with the other students, you can do something separate.
Okay, yes, that's multi-level instruction. That's good. And if you have that a lot, I mean, if you have a big diversity in your class, you need to incorporate some ideas of multi-level instruction. I have a website, I think it's on the front of the handout. That is just a place to keep, what's the word, repository, to keep all of, is that the right word? Almost sounds wrong. To keep all of our workshops and things, and we have some workshops on multi-level instruction that might be helpful in that. But let me answer more directly, Rosemary, your question. There's something that I think is really important. You don't want the students to have an unsuccessful, well, I shouldn't say, you don't want to get the students discouraged. Okay? Students need to know that there is some tolerance for error and mistake, because all of us make mistakes when we speak. So first of all, what is a successful application and what is not? There is some threshold there, because not everything they say in the application is going to be perfect, right? So they're going to make mistakes. Now, some students may stumble a lot more than another student. They might not get it. And we're going to talk in a few minutes about the recycling issues in Stand Out. So you can see, remember that system that we said, they learn, they forget, they learn, they forget, they learn, they forget, they learn, they forget. If they understand that process, and you understand that process, they're going to get it again, and they're going to get it again. So they don't have to be perfect when they're at the application, but they need to be somewhat ready. For example, and I'll give you this story, I always tell this story, so I apologize. I'm sure you haven't heard it, but it's on tape now, and everybody's going to say she tells that story every time. But here's the thing. My son, Brian, he's now 24 years old, but he is like this genius kid. And when he was 16, teaching him how to drive was a scary, scary, scary proposition. And the reason it was so scary was because, like many geniuses, he just didn't have common sense. He would just not know what to do. Get in the intersection, the light turns red. What do? Get out of the intersection, son. I'm holding my hands, holding on to everything I can, hoping that nobody hits us. And teaching him to drive was scary. But we practiced, and we practiced, and we practiced, and we practiced. And then what we do, I took him to the DMV for his test. Now, evaluation doesn't have to be a test, but in this case it is. He took the driver's test. He passed the driver's test. Yippee, son, you did it. Now you can drive. You don't need me in the car anymore. It's your baby. You can do it. Just don't drive in my car. and this is the part I'm talking about. He had a couple of accidents after that, nothing serious. But I just remember him coming home with that big scrape on the car. And he says, Dad, I scraped up the car, but you don't have to worry about that, Dad, because it's my car. I said, no, it's not your car, it's my car, son. But the idea was that he can make mistakes. We still can make mistakes in application. But if he wasn't ready at the DMV, what would he do? I would go back and practice more, right? So that's what you were saying. Yes. Are there any other practice? We need to practice differently. We can't just keep doing the same thing over and over. You do the same thing, you get the same result. So what can we do differently? So in Stand Out, there's 3 exercises for practice. Is there any place else in Stand Out that you could do more practice? Is there any other resources for more practice for that same lesson?
The review.
The review. Okay, but before we get to the review, we're still in this lesson.
Oh, well, the challenges.
Okay, you got the grammar challenge and the reading challenge. There's 2 areas there. Some people asked me at the last workshop about reading and writing challenge, and they said, you know, am I supposed to do all of this? My suggestion was, look, it really depends on your students, but if I was concentrating on reading, for example, I would pull out at the appropriate time this first reading. In every lesson, there's a reading. This isn't it. There's a life skill type reading. Here it is, feijoada. Do any of you know feijoada? Great.
Yeah.
Brazilian like soup. It's very good. Yeah, feijoada. Anyway, don't follow this and don't follow these instructions. It won't come out as good as it does. Go to a restaurant, go to a churrascaria and have one. But the idea is that I have charts. We have all sorts of different life skills. Here's some advertisements for housing for sale and rent. These kind of things. I said, you know, if you want more practice and you're doing a reading on your life skill is reading classified ads, well, there's some more right here. The other thing that I think that sometimes people don't realize is this. You know what this is?
Your book.
Yeah. What?
That's your stick.
Oh, so heavy. All right, so this here, I'm always so dramatic. This here are the worksheets that are available to you just for one level of Stand Out. There's 400 here. Do you have to print all these out? No. We just do this so you can see what they are. But in the back of your lesson planner is the Activity Bank CD-ROM. The Activity Bank CD-ROM has well over 400 worksheets available for you. Those worksheets are on Microsoft Word. So you say, hey, you know, they have to learn, they're not learning this vocabulary. Change something. You can make it, you can add your students' names, you can do all sorts of things. But the Activity Bank CD-ROM is a great resource that I hope that you're thinking about using. So if you need to do another practice or you don't like something in the lesson plan, here's some more practice right here. There's at least one for every lesson. There's often 2 or 3. Also in here are some suggestions on how to do computer skills and also internet activities. And if you don't have access to internet activities in the classroom where the students can do it, you can still do it with them if you have something like this, or you can print things out. So like, for example, weather.yahoo.com is on here. And so they can go to the weather or Google Weather, either way. They can go there. First, you have them predict what's the weather in your country right now. And then you can pull out the sheet and say, here, this is your country, and you can show them the weather for their country after they figure it out. Another great practice. So there's all sorts of things here that are available for you. So you got grammar challenge, and you got the reading writing challenge, and you have the Activity Bank CD-ROM. Okay, are you utilizing that very much?
Yes.
How are you doing with that?
I am.
Okay, another thing you can do is use the Exam View, not as a testing program, but as extra practice. Do you know about Exam View?
No.
Aha, okay. So Exam View, it's a CD that your school has, and you say, okay, I want to have a little review on, and I want it to look like CASAS. Do you guys do CASAS here?
Yes.
Okay, so I want it to look like CASAS. So you pick you say I want to have 20 multiple choice questions. I want to have the life skills, and I want to have this for this lesson or this unit or whatever, and you tell it what you want, and within 3 minutes, and if I had it charged up, I'd get it for you, but in 3 minutes, you have a test. That fast. And you can print it out, you can export it to Word if you want to change it around, or you can change it around right there in the program, and you have a test for them. You have the test, and it's a great practice for them. If you don't want to use it as a test, you can use it as practice. And it gives them that experience with CASAS and everything else, so they have that experience as well. Does that make sense? So there are so many avenues, and of course you have great ideas, I know, about how to get them to practice more, and you know your students, but I wanted to make sure you knew about all these other avenues of practice. So if you get to a point, you're going to need to decide where that point is when they're ready to move on, and what the reason we have the word evaluation here is because this is crucial to, before they go on the application, to have a pretty good feel for what they're doing. Will the students do it perfectly? No. Will some students have a lot more trouble? Yes. Will, do you need to encourage them, let them know that that's okay, we're going to review this again. It's normal that you're having a little bit of issues with this, but you know, and some other students are too. You're not the only one. Bob, you're not the only one having problems, okay? Emmy's also having problems. I don't have to say that, but you know, you have the idea. So that's really important for this, because you want to be able to feel comfortable. Students want to be able to feel comfortable that they've accomplished something. All right? So that's the lesson plan, and I threw a whole bunch of stuff in at the same time. Any other questions about that?
21st century skills embedded.
Yes, they're not in the. I actually have a workshop on this. They're not in here. We've got the CASAS and we have SCAN and EFF, but the 21st century skills are also included, including technology skills. But yeah, the technology skills, they're not so much in the textbook as they're in. I mean, we have the internet activities and different things like that, so that you have a progression of the computer
And the CD-ROM.
and the CD, yeah, and you have other things like the video and other things like that too. Yes, Ben.
Leave aside for a minute the life skills and the vocabulary, pronunciation and academic, and just focus with me for a minute on the grammar component of this. How critical is it for the students to master a grammar component before, you know, moving to the next unit or the next lesson? Because that is one thing that bothers me when particularly students have inconsistent attendance or what have you. And I worry about moving forward too fast without a good grounding in each of the grammar items. But on the other hand, you're also indicating that there's kind of a repetition built into Stand Out, so maybe I shouldn't worry about it so much.
Yeah, this is my feeling. You shouldn't worry about it so much. But I don't really want to be so flippant about it. Okay, I have to do this because I like this image. Ready? I made this image and I'm proud of it. So here we go. Oh, pushed the wrong button. Lost the image. Yes. All right. This is about grammar progression. Okay. Grammar is very, very important, I think, and grammar has different elements to it. It has fluency and accuracy, two different things. Accuracy means that the students are saying everything precisely right, and we know that we don't even do that. You know, I'll make mistakes, and today I was asking, should I say we or us here, and whom and who, and we make other mistakes, and we come back and we fix it. And then there's fluency, where that's more about conversation and being comfortable about it coming off our mouths. And so there's other aspects about it. We also have what we call exposure, and we have learning and recycle and expand. Now that example I gave about the third person singular S is a perfect example of this. And that is that our students are going to learn, but they won't acquire the language. That's what the repetition is for. When you get into the higher levels, what book do you use? 3? 3. Yeah. When you after book 2, there's less repetition because there's more. There are more structures to learn. But the philosophy or the truth is still the same, and that is that students are learning and being exposed to it over and over. And the more they get exposed, the closer they get to this acquisition. So they're really getting exposed, they're learning it again, and eventually they get to acquisition. But everybody gets to acquisition at a different time. So if we give too much emphasis on getting it perfectly right, our students are going to get discouraged because they're going to, 1 month goes by and then you go back to the adjective clauses and they can't do it anymore. They're going to get discouraged. But that's a normal process, in my view. This is my view. This is doctrine of Rob Jenkins. But this is what I think. I think that the students need to know that it's natural and normal for them to learn this and forget it. and eventually it will come back, and every time they learn it again, like building muscles, every time they exercise again, that muscle will, when it grows back, will grow bigger and bigger until they're an Arnold Schwarzenegger of languages. So that's kind of the idea in my view. Now, this is just my view. So, Ben, I don't know if you're agreeing with me or not, but I want you to know that that's how I feel about it, and that's how Stand Out's designed. In Book 2 and Book 1, you're going to see the repetition is, because there's not near as many structures, the repetition is much, I'm sorry, I stole someone's book. But let me just read this real quick to you so you understand this. In fact, it's easier to see it in Grammar Challenge. In Grammar Challenge, which is the same structure, are the same structures, we have the simple present, live, in challenge, Unit 1, Challenge 1, and be. And then in Challenge 2, we have. And then Unit 2, we have negative and affirmative simple present. And in Unit 3, we have the simple present. And Unit 4, it's not there, it's just embedded in it. But here in Unit 5, we have the simple present and present continuous. In Book 1, you have the simple present with live, and then you have the simple present with shop, and then you have the simple present with want and hope and light, and then you have the simple present. And as you go through, you see this progression, and there is a progression. It does have a progression. We have a progression chart that shows, in fact, it might be right here. We have a progression chart. Yeah, this is part of it. So this is part of the progression chart. And so we have literacy, low beginning, high beginning, low intermediate, high intermediate, advanced. And you can see we have done this, so we know that there's this progression. And yes, it's a continuum. If you think of it as, I'm going to complete it and it's going to be done and you can't move on until it's done, you're not going to get done, because their students are going to still struggle with it.